So thank you everyone for joining our first webinar in this series that's coming up in the next 4 weeks. As I mentioned, my name is Ravi Mistry. I'm part of the customer success team here at the Information Lab. And we're going to talk to you today about building a community of practice in a remote world. I'm joined by my colleague, Emma White, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, yeah, so my name's Emma, also from the Information Lab as well.
Cool. So if we move on to the next slide, we're actually running a fair few events through this period in our lives where we're mainly working remotely. So almost all of our regular Tableau and Alteryx trainings and events are running virtually. And alongside this, we're also adding a few more things in as well. So for example, there's some spatial sessions coming up. Keep your eye out if you're interested in sports analytics as well. So I'm working with my colleague Lorna Brown on building some content for that. But yeah, so have a look on our meetup page if you haven't already. Sign up, that's the best way to keep in touch with all of the online training sessions, etc., that we'll be running in the next few months and beyond. So what's our series about? Well, this series is mainly about the customer success work that myself and Emma do. We're going to be talking about building community practice in a remote world today, but here are a few of the other sessions that are split into two separate sections. So the first is about understanding, which is a big focusing on data trends. And then the Let's Talk sessions are going to be focused on elements that we've seen with customers we've worked with, such as education community, and sort of giving you some ideas and pieces to think about on them. Again, all of these are on the meetup page. So if you are interested in anything you see on the screen right now, do go across to our meetup and join and then subscribe to those sessions. Let's dig in to our first slide. So how can you build a community of practice remotely? This is the first question because we are looking to, in this period, we're ending up, I think going a bit too far. In this period, we are all working remotely. So in this session, we're going to talk a bit about all these different things. And I think Emma's going to go through the sort of three main topics we'll focus on.
Yeah, so the main topics we're going to look at today is how to work effectively remotely. So us at the Information Lab, we're actually a mostly remote company. We only kind of had an office when we opened our data school, and the rest of us, the consulting team, all work remotely when we're not with clients. So we're going to talk through some of the things that we do to make sure that we work effectively remotely, and some of the tips that we've kind of picked up on the way from other people as well. We're going to talk about growing an internal community. We're going to look at data and analytics communities, but this could be applied to other ones as well, and how to do that remotely and virtually. And we've also got some bonus tips that we'll put in and ask you to discuss things with us as well as we go along.
So the first one we've got in this section about how to effectively work remotely, we really want to focus on both individually and as part of a team. So one of the things we do is we start and end our days with a virtual check-in. So that's just either a hangout, just to sort of have a stand-up meeting for even 10 to 15 minutes, just to check in with each other. I think this works really well just to frame your day in your own mind, as well as understand what everyone else is going to be working on.
Yeah, and so the next point is to use your internal chat channels. Now, within the Information Lab, we use a platform called Convo, but there's obviously lots of other ones out there, Slack being another really big one, Teams, Microsoft Teams. And to use those channels rather than email, that's what we do. So we would never email, I would never email Ravi, for example. It'd always be on our chat channel, or on, being able to post messages on a board and things like that. And that's for several reasons. So firstly, email, it tends to be really siloed. So you could just email one person or a group of people, but it's not seen by everyone. So not everyone can participate in that. And also because it takes you out of your email inbox and allows more kind of free communication, even if it is just text communication. So there's some really good tips to use those chat channels more effectively in this time.
And I think the third point sort of links into the first two, and investing in good hardware in your workspace and making sure that you're in the right frame of mind and also the sort of right environment to be working. And I think investing in good hardware, such as a good webcam. So I think everyone's been on a web conference call where someone's got their video on, and it's like watching something on YouTube from the 1990s, like one of those old videos, and it's not the most crisp. And I think we've internally compared having a good webcam to dressing well effectively. It's the new sort of first impression you make when you're chatting to someone, and also that replicates that sort of human interaction we have to see someone's face. Similarly, having a good headset or microphone, making sure that it's a pleasure to use, something that's not too tight on your head if it's a headset. And again, making sure that your area is clear, spacious, etc. All the things you'd normally have in a workspace in your home environment. And these all sort of fit into our approach to remote working in general, not just about working in silos or in this period of time.
Fourth point, routine is your friend. So I think it's really easy to get out of routine when you're working from home, because if you're in an office, you kind of you have your commute, you have all those things that kind of you start your day with. And working from home, it's really easy just to be like, oh, I'll sleep in bed for a little bit longer. Oh, I'll empty the dishwasher and do bits and pieces, rather than actually like getting to your desk and starting work. So make sure you do have that routine is really important. And also making sure that you kind of get up and about and you move around. Obviously at the moment that might not always be, you know, going to the gym in the morning, but it could be that, you know, you go out for a walk in the morning or a run, or do something just to kind of like make sure you're moving your body and not just sitting in your chair all day, because it actually makes you more productive to get up and about and stretch around as well.
I think that's really important. I think one of the things I started to do is using a commute effectively. I used to say that in inverted commas, and just going for a walk for half an hour and pretending I'm going somewhere. Getting dressed and things like that are so important as well. But yeah, and then finally switching off. So making sure that you have that routine to finish the day. I think we're all victims of our own sort of desire to continue working, and you know, working from home means that you never really leave the office, or nor do you arrive. So switching off and having that sort of time, I'm going to start work here and finish work here, and then moving away from that environment that you work in, I think is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's so easy when you've got all of your equipment at home and your phone and your laptop, just to, you know, something pings and you're like, oh, I'll just look at that for 5 minutes. But actually it's really beneficial to switch off. We got a message on the chat from Tibor. Any recommendations for security practices? A home computer might not be as secure as one that's set up by IT or a company. Now at the Information Lab, we actually have like a bring your own device policy. So we can basically choose the laptop that we want. And the way that we make sure things are secure are to always make sure that we have a password on that laptop, or like sometimes you can put in two-factor authentication. So you might have to have a phone and you put something in your phone to kind of open your laptop. So that's the first thing, is definitely have a password on your machine before you can even get into it. Also, for a lot of our systems, our IT kind of sets up, well, Craig is our IT, but he kind of sets up a lot of things as well. So we have like minimum password requirements for some platforms. We use Google authentication for most things, and you can set that up to be like two-factor authentication as well. But yeah, Danny's also put on the chat that a good important thing is sometimes your VPN into a computer that is set up by your IT.
Correct.
Yeah. Have you got any?
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. The VPN and the remote sort of setups are the best way for sort of data security. I think more and more you're getting to people using the cloud infrastructure and having and trusting cloud security a bit more. But I think the main thing always comes down to trust in people. And one of the policies we tend to work on at the Information Lab is making sure that the people you're working with you trust completely, and then making sure that you can work with them as well. But yeah, good question. Thanks for that, Tibor.
Right, let's move on to our next topic. If you do have questions, then do feel free to put them in the chat, and we've kind of got like a little section in a minute to have some discussions by chat as well.
Sure. So yeah, one of the other things we've mentioned, we've started to do is have virtual office hours for drop-ins. So I've done this regularly with my mentees. So within our little community in the Information Lab, we have sort of a structure of pods and mentors. One of the things that I've ended up doing is just going on a Google Hangout or a Google Meet session, and just being like, I'm online, just drop in if you just want to see someone chat to me, as if you would in an office, and sort of making that virtual office environment real. So you can pop into Ravi's room, chat to him for a bit, double check something, and then go, rather than being like, "Hi Ravi, I'm just going to type this message on Convo," because it's a lot richer to have that conversation face to face, or even just being able to share your screen and all these things you might normally do. So making sure that that sort of face to face interaction you might miss from being in an office isn't missed at all. I think that's really good for knowledge sharing as well within sort of a data community or any sort of community that you're building internally.
Yeah, I totally agree. So for example, when we get support questions into us at the Information Lab, if it's something I'm having to think about typing an email out and thinking about, oh, I need to include some screenshots, I'll basically dump the email and just be like, are you free for a hangout? Can we like just share screens and talk through it? And I think people will get a lot better experience of doing that. And also like webcams always on, so you can kind of like see the other person. Because as we all know, like if you're typing stuff out in an email or even sometimes on the phone, with your kind of like the way your voice comes across might always not always be how you mean it to come across. So I think having that face to face is really important. On the second point, this is an idea that's kind of come up from working with some customers. They actually run cafe sessions. So again, a lot of our customers work remotely as well. And the only thing about working remotely is when you're not in an office, you might not like just bump into someone while you're having lunch or making coffee or something like that and start talking. So actually your kind of network of people that you speak to on a day-to-day is actually quite small if you work remotely. So these cafe sessions are kind of like just really short 10 minutes to virtually meet someone you wouldn't normally have to speak to on a day-to-day interaction. So a lot of companies like cross-pollinate teams and share ideas using these sessions.
Exactly. And I think alongside that, missing those water cooler chats and like, hey, do you want to see what I'm working on? Is difficult as well. And this is where, the thing we mentioned about having that internal system that isn't email does help. Because like, hey, I'm working on something if anyone wants to ask me about it. So we had that earlier today. One of our colleagues, Andre, was like, hey, I'm working on this thing. If anyone wants to come and watch or ask me something about it, hop onto this Meet Google Hangout. Alongside this, Emma sort of touched on this briefly, but doctor sessions and user groups are still possible alongside this. So, for example, you can use something like Calendly. So I'm always on the lookout for great productivity apps. So if you have any that is part of your trusted systems, do let me know. But one I've started to use a bit more is Calendly, which allows you to set office hours where people can drop in like a doctor session for you to join and say, hey, let me try this. And as Emma says, having that face-to-face interaction and having them explain what they're trying to do. Again, as Emma says, structuring your thoughts into an email or a message or on the phone is harder than sort of being like, I've got this thing over here and I'm trying to do this and I want to connect them, and using those non-verbal communicative gestures is really useful to do. Similarly, having a virtual user group, right? So like today we've got 32 of you on the call. Similarly, you can run similar like user groups like show and tell sessions as you normally would in a meeting, right? So you might, again, you miss that face-to-face interaction, but what you gain is the ability to be really flexible. So you're able to get more people on who are sort of passively listening, whereas having to physically move to a meeting. So again, there's pros and cons to this, but of course you make the most of it by increasing the availability. So say, for example, we wanted to run this in a event space, we are limited by the number of people, but now we can have this as a truly global event or global set of webinars.
Yeah, and kind of following on from that is those kind of virtual weekly challenges that are in the community. So things like Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, the Prepping Data Thursday. You can do those virtually as well as like just some ideas, but it could be that, you do all the challenge together for an hour in the day, maybe over lunch. And the way you would do it is like flick 3 people's screens, so get someone to share their screen for like a minute and just, share how different people are approaching the challenge or the subject.
Agreed.
I've seen those work really well virtually.
Yeah, Danny Bradley from LNER has just put something in the chat about they're starting a Maker Monday live session in a few weeks. So what again, as he mentions, it's great to break up the day. So you might have your day-to-day tasks you're working on, maybe that report you've been welding on, but having that break for an hour to work on something that's upskilling you is rewarding both for your business, because your business, as a business, you're able to add and grow the skills and the foundational learning that someone might have, but also for the person, because they feel like they're not just working on something in anger, but they're actually trying to understand what's happening and why it's happening. I think that's the value of these weekly challenges and sort of trying to create those learning paths for people. There's a question here about how do you suggest setting up cafe sessions in a big organization? That's a great question. I think for me, and I'll pass it over to Emma in a moment, you almost get people to opt in, saying, hey, I'm interested. And then you start getting them to, then you match sort of people who have opted into this thing to start. And then you get them to start talking about it, right? And then you sort of get referrals saying, like, get more people into the cycle. And if you have something like Ultrix or even Excel, you can use like a random number generator and assign everyone a number and say 1 and 6, you have to chat to each other, which works really quite nicely. Yeah, make those sorts of fixture lists and sort of get people to interact with those folks. Emma, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, completely agree. That's a great way to do it, to get people to opt in. Also, what always works well with stuff like this is seeing if there's anyone in management that would back it and help you promote it as well, because that's, when it's got
and also join in,
management buy-in. Yeah, exactly, and join in, because when it's got management buy-in, those sorts of things work much better, I find.
Agreed. We mentioned lunch. We mentioned a couple of these things in passing, but lunch and learns work really nicely as well. So again, given that we are now all currently working remote or mostly remote, especially in the next few months, right? The ability of having lunch and learns where you're almost, you can sit at your desk and eat your lunch and also passively learn something and partake. Again, seeing faces, interacting with people, that always helps. But the second part of a lunch and learn is you can record them, and the recording means that it's not an exclusive event, right? So all of these events we're going to be running, we are going to be publishing onto YouTube, because we don't want this to be an exclusive event. We want this to be consumed by many people forever, right? Or for at least however long YouTube continues to be up there, right? But having that ability to pause, rewind, etc., makes videos very much easier to consume than maybe a webinar, a one-off webinar, right?
Yeah, definitely. And if you're running this kind of stuff virtually at the moment and you're recording it and you're responsible for running the analytics community, you've then got a bunch of resources at the end of this time that you can share and put up on your internet pages and stuff like that as well.
Agreed. And I think building that sort of almost wiki of information internally really does help, especially when getting started and bringing on new people.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of like our last point here, is like, use your internet pages or Slack channels and things like that regularly and persistently. So in times like this, making sure they're up to date, that you are putting stuff on there hopefully every day, but at least a few times a week, and you're putting really useful links and content on there. You're sharing what events that you're running on those channels as well. And when you have an environment that is updated regularly and you persist with it, that's when you're going to see like that community building up and people following it and going to it regularly to make sure they've not missed anything.
Agreed. And just to finish on that point, we've seen a lot of people, a lot of our customers build these up and they're like, but they're just very quiet. This is a great opportunity to make sure these work and they're sticky, right? People start to use them and see them as valuable resources in a time like this, and that really helps that change management and sort of mindset amendment, right? So like changing people's hearts and minds towards a data-driven culture is really, really important.
Yeah, all great points. Should we move on to our last little bit? So we've got a few bonus tips. I'm going to be really quick with these, just because we've only got a few minutes left and I want to make sure that people get to ask questions and have a chat as well. I'll let you start with a few tips,
Yeah.
Ravi.
Yeah, I think the first three I'll go through. So make noise, be yourself, and ask questions. This surely goes without saying. We have a concept of there's no such thing as a dumb question at the Information Lab, because if you ask one dumb question a day, your questions inevitably become smarter, because hopefully you learn from the answers you get. Being yourself means that you can almost say, hey, I don't know anything about this, help me. And someone usually, hopefully, does chip in and help. And I think that really does compute. The next two, not private and right now. The hashtag right now is just like almost like tweeting, like this is what I'm doing. I'm making a sandwich, but really in a work sense. So what we do is like right now on a webinar with Emma with X number of participants, great. But realistically, what we can end up doing with that is sharing what you're up to right now, and then not private is basically a really nice way of saying. Listen, this is probably something that's beneficial to someone else, so I'm going to not private you, and you can share that with the team on the main channel. Do you want to finish off these three here?
Yeah, so we've got a hashtag this week. So basically every Monday on our channel, we do a hashtag this week, and we say what we're doing this week in a short message. So I'm with this customer this day, I'm doing this that day, and I've got this meeting and that meeting, and I'm working on this project. Hashtag today, you can probably go into a bit more detail about what you're doing, and it's just literally what you've got on your agenda today. And it's also really important, the whole like be yourself part is to have that small talk. So when you're virtual, like the small talk is hard to have on a day-to-day basis that you might have, you know, when you're having lunch or having coffee and things like that with your colleagues. So we would always recommend like off-topic channels. So we've got a few, you know, on our convo, one about board games, baking, there's different sports activities, there's one for parents, like things to do with your kids at the moment and stuff like that. So don't be afraid to have those off-topic channels for people to communicate in as well. Okay, so we're going to go over to you in the audience now. So we'd love to have a discussion about what you're doing at your organizations to grow community, especially at the moment if you've got things that you've done virtually that have worked well, or things that you're thinking of doing or got plans to do. We'd love to have that chat. So either type in or unmute yourself. That'd be great. So Donna's just asked, can someone repeat the meaning of hashtag not private? So for us at Information Lab, we want to make sure that most of our chat is public. So if I open up a chat window to Ravi and ask, how do I do this in Tableau? Ravi should respond with hashtag not private. And that basically tells me to go and ask that in a wider group of people. Because those sorts of questions shouldn't be asked one-to-one, because someone else could also learn from the answer.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's always worth explaining that to people before saying hashtag not private to them, because it might just seem a bit flippant. So we try and always explain why we're doing it as well. Well, I could answer this to you, but I want to answer this on main. And I've also done this retrospectively with people in the past where we've gone through something and I'm like, right, can you ask that on Convo so I can respond there as well? And we can sort of replay this there, because it's more useful for everyone to learn. And the second part is it's searchable, right? The chat I have with Emma or Emma has with me, we both can see it. If someone has this problem in a year's time, they can search the exact same thing using that sort of honeypot channel or stream to find out the answer there. Good question. Thank you for that. Anything else from anyone else? Remote user group. Cool. So Zoe, I'll mention Zoe's question. So I ran a remote user group the other day, found it hard to get people involved. Any tips for getting people to ask questions or participate? My one is make it really awkward. So like just don't talk and see if anyone sort of answers it just to kill the silence. Emma, what are your tips?
Yes, if you're asking questions, it maybe depends on the setting, but if you're running a training session, don't be afraid to ask someone specifically, so actually mention their name. And the more you do that, the more people are kind of anticipating you asking them a question, so they pay more attention as well.
Agreed. I think also incorporating quizzes, polls, and like just show me what you're up to sort of things works quite well as well. Especially if you once you gamify something, making it better, most people do and get involved.
Anything to break that barrier to speaking or asking a question is what you want to do. You want to make it normal for this sort of thing to happen.
I love that story, Elena. So Elena said that her team, quite small, did a virtual tour of our homes when we moved work from home, and switching webcams does help. Oh yeah, 100%. I was talking earlier today about I need to put posts up behind me because that's a great talking point. So one of our colleagues has like a bunch of board games behind him. Again, that's a great talking point. And yeah.
I do the same with my cuddly toys. That's my talking point with people.
So remember,
go on, Graham.
So remember, this is Graham. You were asking earlier what do we do? So at IHG, we have office hours, have been physically in the office in Atlanta and remote for me. So that's very easily to switch to remote. Peculiarly, for a lot of people, I was always remote from the office in Atlanta since I'm based in the UK. The other thing we do is use Microsoft Teams. We have a team channel, people chat. We're trying very hard. It's very difficult to get out of the habit, as you say, responding direct to an email. If somebody emails us with a "how do I" question, it says, bring it to office hours.
Yeah.
Trying very hard if we answer an email question to duplicate that onto the Teams so that everybody's got it available.
A good point on that, actually. One of our customers actually did something called the roundup. So what they do is any questions they were asked and they did take on, like in office hours or doctor session, they'd share that back to the community in this sort of newsletter roundup every once a week or every 2 weeks to be like, hey, here's the questions we got. Here's how we solved them. Maybe it's useful to you. And
that's great.
That sort of roundup.
We'll take that on. Thanks, Ravi.
Excellent. Tibor, again, I'm going through the chat now. 2 important measures, especially if it's a hobby or organized online: retention and encouragement. Agreed, 100%. Making sure people use and do come back for that as well. Just going through a couple more. Donna's got a dedicated Yammer page for working from home for COVID. Agreed. Again, those sorts of informal Slack channels and areas are super useful. Danny, spot on. Even if 2 people sign up, go ahead anyway, because you gain something and people learn. Cafe corner, but yeah, agreed. It can be difficult, but so what advice do we have on how it won't end up with the same people talking and taking the lead? Emma, any ideas that I think passing the baton?
Ask people to present that don't normally speak or maybe get talked over a little bit. So, actively make them lead the meeting or whatever. And also, if you're leading the meeting and you notice that people are getting talked over or some people aren't talking, don't be afraid to say their name and say, do you have anything to add? Or, it's all about encouraging people to open up and talk, because it's kind of a novel thing to talk over a webcam, for example.
Cool. Last 2 questions. So first is, Emma, what are your top 3 tips for introducing a traditional organization to a new way of working?
I think you have to circulate the tips for doing virtual meetings. I think so that would be my one thing is put together a list of things to encourage in a virtual meeting. Making sure that people have the right equipment if this is brand new as well. Yeah. Any other ones you'd add, Ravi?
No, but I think we're about to lose the Zoom. So let's finish off for now. Let's finish off for now. Thank you all for coming. I think hopefully it's been useful. And do come along to any more of our events. We'll share the recording on the meetup page as soon as we're done.
Well, thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you very much.